Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel, and I'm an addicted alcoholic. I'm here to host. Very honored to be covering for my friend Bill Ward uh,
Just gonna
on
have
this
to.
summit. Um,
Okay, bye. Can I
this
let you guys
is.
go? Yeah. Okay, bye.
I'm very honored to host for my friend Bill, who's away in Kamloops, and this summit series is about culture and connection, Indigenous in recovery. It's a mini summit brought to you by Billwardlife and the Athabasca First Nations. The purpose is to help individuals, families, and organizations better understand addiction and the spiritual malady that drives addiction and all self-destructive behaviors. The philosophy is simple, adhering to the philosophy of one person, one family, one community at a time. Billwardlife is committed to providing tailored workshops, speaking engagements, and resources to First Nations communities. Our approach is to inspire and educate individuals, families, and organizations to preserve and strengthen Indigenous culture, to foster resilience and harmony through modern approaches, cultural practices, and interactive teaching. The mission, our goal is to empower individuals, families, and communities to embrace courage, truth, and self awareness. By sharing personal stories of struggle and growth, we inspire others to pursue healing, harmony, and most importantly, authenticity. True transformation lies within. It requires deep desire and a commitment to do the necessary work. So I'm very happy today to be, I'll be joined by two speakers. I myself will be hosting and also speaking. I'll be the second speaker. Um, so I thank everybody that's present. There will be an opportunity after each speaker has spoken for you to engage, ask questions, maybe provide commentary, thank the speakers, whatever you need to do. We really encourage that anybody that's tuning in to participate, and to give any input that you have because it's a community and everybody's a voice is important. Um, so I'll we will prompt questions for the speakers once they're done. And obviously look for participation from the crowd as well as taking thought-provoking questions. So I'll tell you a little bit about Bill. Normally, he's the facilitator and host of this podcast. He's the founder of Billwardlife, the UDR Cast podcast. He's a facilitator, program builder, addictions educational consultant, and most importantly, a recovering addict and alcoholic who's living in recovery. A committed First Nation recovery activist with roots in Driftpile Cree Nation who focuses on delving into the profound spiritual issues that frequently underlie addiction and detrimental behaviors. Leveraging his passion, personal journey, and expertise, Bill actively serves individuals, families, and organizations, contributing to a heightened awareness and understanding of substance abuse. Bill is recognized and celebrated within his community as individuals are empowered to confront the challenges which accompany substance abuse and transform their lives. So that's a bit about Bill. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker, who's just an amazing woman, Nadine Ducharme. Uh, is a two-spirited Anishinaabe Kwe woman from Wayway-Sikapo First Nation, Treaty 2 in Manitoba. She's a fourth year international Indigenous students studies student at the University of Calgary who will be entering her final year in her bachelor program this upcoming September, graduating in 2026. Clean and sober for 3 years, she hosts a Wabrati meeting on campus and honors her ancestors through the Saulteaux language learning, ceremony, drumming, singing, and jingle dancing as part of her healing journey. Welcome, Nadine, and we're honored to have you here and to hear your story. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Miigwech, thank you so much for that introduction. I am very honored and very thankful to be part of this organization and this talk today. This will be my first time sharing my story. Um, so I just want to introduce myself in my traditional language. Buju Anin Adishnaka Jayashkwa Anamaki. Hello, my name is Blue Thunderbird. I am an Anishinaabe Kwe from Wewesikapo First Nation in Manitoba. I've been a guest in Calgary, Treaty 7 territory for 15 years. Yeah, I have three adult children and one grandson. My life has been very teachable for me. It's been a learning experience. Um, so when I first started thinking about how I was going to start my story, I always think back to a story my mother told me when I was a teenager. She said that um, she induced her labor that day at her friend's wedding because she had a glass of baby duck champagne. And then she went into labor with me that evening, and I was born the next day. So when I reflect on these kind of stories that I've had and the kind of upbringing that I've had within my own community back home on the reserve, is that we've always had these moments where you decide and you kind of build on your character from those teachings, even if it's not traditional, because I was not raised in a traditional home. I was like in I was in treatment. I went once, and I had to write a letter to my addictions and what was causing me these sickness. And I started it off with, as I'm going to start this story off today with, it all started on my day of my birth in 1978, where, I was born into alcoholism. My mother drank with me that day, and I was born. And it was instilled in my bones from intergenerational trauma that I wasn't even aware of until recently on my healing journey. And I was always upset about it. I was always ashamed about it. I didn't wasn't able to talk about it. It had power over me. When I was able to come to terms with understanding teachings and hardships, that there's always a balance, right? That's the one thing that I'm learning. Um, so when I started, I was very unteachable at the beginning. I was very stubborn. I was very selfish. I had my own ways of doing things. I would not allow people to teach me. I would not allow any guidance, as I always thought I knew better and I knew the best of what I needed to do for myself, without realizing that I was causing myself self-harm. Um, The earliest I could remember when I was young, I would think I was about 7 or 8 when I smoked a cigarette, and then 9 or 10 when I smoked a weed joint, and then 10 or 11 when I started drinking alcohol. It was always introduced into my life. It was always there. There was no sober people really in my community because I wasn't around traditional ways of being. So I know ceremony now that it has sober people, but I didn't have that aspect in my life until I chose to have it in my life as an adult. And growing up with that kind of environment, it gave me the reasoning and excuses to live that way. It was normal. My mother did it. My father did it. My aunts and uncles drove around with us drunk all over the reserve, right? We were allowed to be that way because it was normal and nobody looked at us differently. So for us, for myself, and I could only speak for myself, it was very normal. And I didn't realize that it was not normal until I came into society and into different environments, um, where I questioned even my mother and not understanding that she did the best she could at the time with her trauma and what she was carrying. And then just kind of understanding that she didn't get what she needed from her mother. She didn't give me what I needed from her. And I just carried that on where I didn't give my children the upbringing that they needed. As a single mother, a single alcoholic, drug addict person, I passed on that sickness to them without even knowing. And it was really it was a very progressive, very slow process of becoming a sociable a sociable thing to do when you celebrate to a thing I was doing every day by myself in pain and not being able to express myself, holding it in because I was in survival mode. So just being a robot in society, working to provide for my family as a single mother, and then, thinking I earned that right to celebrate myself, right? So then I would drink, and then it turned into drugs. It turned into a space where I was not willing to conform anymore. It was giving me this false sense of courage where I wasn't being what society wanted me to be. I was stealing, I was living on the streets, I was manipulating and using people for anything that I needed. But at the same time, I treasured my family and I kept them with me. I never lost my children to the system. I didn't have family to raise them. I didn't have family either to hurt them the way I did, but I did it all on my own. And at the time, I didn't realize that I was doing that. I didn't know what healing was. I didn't know what a normal, healthy relationship was, even with myself. But I had glimpses of my true self in those dark times. If I had cheated on my husband, which I did, I would go and tell him the truth about it immediately. So I had those glimpses of my true indigenous self, a true authentic being, a spiritual being. And that's what I did. Even though I was still picking up a bottle or doing drugs or digging myself or losing a job or relocating. I was always running away from my issues. And I always had my children in tow with me. So for me, the family has been a very big, big issue for me. It was very toxic at the beginning of my life where I had nobody to tell me that it was wrong to be drunk and it wasn't right to be drinking every day every day, morning and night. I didn't have anybody to tell me that it wasn't right to step out on your husband or your relationship or to ignore your children, to let them raise themselves. Nobody told me that wasn't how we do things. So I was very much in shock, in culture shock, when I did leave my home and my environment to realize that people live differently, that it's not, you don't have to live that way. I had gotten to a point in my life raising my children where to me, success was having them by my side with my alcoholism and my drug addiction instead of losing them to the system. Success to me was keeping a job even though I'd go there drunk or hungover. To me, success was enrolling into university for the first time and then failing because I was still an alcoholic and I couldn't focus to study. And so these little bits of success to me were based on, money and finances and keeping things together even though they're toxic. So that stayed with me for decades. I was an alcoholic and a drug addict for years. I've only started to become sober in the last 10, 12 years of my life with relapses and trying and then giving up. Giving up is one of my big things that I like to do because it's always easy. It's easier to give up than to continue on. So I even in my dark days, I would even like take pride in the fact that I could cook and make things taste better for the drugs that I was using. Or I would take pride in the fact that I could drive for 8 hours to go back home for a funeral if I would just do some lines or drink and drive and still be, you know, I was tough and people see me as that way, even in the wrong way. I was still very much like I can do this. And I did. I could live a life, I could live two lives. So I was in that space for many years, hurting myself, hurting my children, harming my people that I loved, burning bridges to the point where my rock bottom was living on the streets because I chose to do whatever I wanted to do. And that made me go on the streets because nobody would trust me because I would steal their money or sleep with their boyfriend if they let me in the house, or I would take their money, take the drugs, whatever it had to be in that moment, whatever I was feeling. And that moment when I chose myself instead of my family, I was in a very dark space. I was living on the streets, but still wanting to be sober. I tried to be sober on the streets for 20 days, and that was the hardest 20 days of my life because it's kind of, you can't find a sober community really when you're living on the streets. And if you do, there's like one or two of you, and you just kind of give in because somebody has a house for you to party in for a day. It's like you're gonna go have a shower, you're gonna go hang out with the people that, are keeping you down because we're all just the same. We're all just sick. We're all connecting. We have that toxic connection that we crave. And that's what I learned in my sobriety is that I needed connection. That's what I was lacking. So I was trying to get it through drugs, through useless relationships with people, men and women. So that was when I was on the streets and my daughter told me she was pregnant and that I wouldn't see my grandchild if I was still in the same state. And I was very angry at her for saying that to me because they were adults now and they were starting to be honest with me and telling me the things that they didn't think they had the right to tell me when they were living under my roof. So I was really appreciative of the honesty, but very hurt. And then my hurt turned to anger because I only had two emotions at this time. I had angry and I had scared. And those are the only two I could label and the only two that I went to. So months went by, I was still living on the street, and then my oldest daughter, she stayed in contact with me when I was in the street. She'd allow me to go to her home to shower. She'd come and meet me at the bus station or the train station to talk and use Wi-Fi. She was the one that kind of went and she would go to the store with me to buy me something if I needed something. Um, because I think she didn't want to lose me. She lost her father to a drug overdose. And at that time, I said I would never do that to her. I would never. And yet I overdosed and I died for 8 minutes. Then I came back and I still went back onto the streets. And then, and having her with me, even in reflection now, I could see that she was holding on to me. And that love and that connection kept me afloat until my second daughter finally called us and said she was in labor and that she wanted us to go and see her. That was my that was my light. She forgave me for who I was and wanted me to come and see her. I went to Grand Prairie I wasn't there for the birth of my grandson, but I was there when he was born and afterwards, and that was when I changed. It took another human being, an innocent human being, to come into my life with endless love that changed me. It made me realize that I had something, I had something more to be responsible for. I went into treatment once in my life, and that was in Grand Prairie. I had a 21-day program. I called it short and sweet. Um, I had an amazing counselor there, Lindsay. That was the first moment in my life that I had to myself. I had no children to take care of. I had no drunk mother to watch. I had no little brother to parent because I had done that all my life with my mother. And I had no one to worry about. So with that time, I was like, what do I do? I I started yoga, I was reading, I started running on treadmill, and then I realized like also the sadness set in. Like I didn't even know that I didn't have a self, right? And that was my realization in treatment. And then the reflection of like the three inventories, right? Um, Sexual inventory was not even, I didn't even think it was a thing until my counselor taught me about how I'm seeking those, on my experiences in my past, that those are what I'm doing to fill. And even now, like I'm still learning has as a person in recovery, that those are layers, layers and layers that I'm unpeeling, and I get closer to my spirit, and I get closer to seeing my light that I have inside. And I never knew this. I always was so disconnected with the person that I was in addiction that I named her Sasha. I had to name her something because I wasn't ready to accept that that was who I was being in that moment. The one that cheated on her husband was Sasha. The one that drove the car when she was drunk and smashed her vehicle and drove away from the scene of the crime, that wasn't me. That was Sasha. So in my healing, the first thing that I talked to with a therapist, because I am going both, I'm using both worlds. I'm using Western world and I'm using the indigenous ancestral way of my teachings to heal myself. So I have a therapist who's been helping me with grief since I've lost my mother. I lost my mother a long time ago. I lost her when I was 21 or 23, and then I lost my dad 5 years ago. And then 5 years ago, when I lost my dad, made me realize that I hadn't grieved my mom correctly either. So, or properly, or slowly. So I have a therapist whom I very love very much. She's a Lakota Indigenous therapist that just does work with me, helping me heal my inner child. She's the one that's helping me understand that I could be Sasha. Sasha's me. She's just I need to acknowledge her. I need to thank her for what she's done for me. She helped me survive all those years of trauma, all the years of reckless behaviors and being in survival mode. So I'm learning that as I learn traditional ways from teachings, and I'm very thankful for the people that I'm learning from because they're not my own people. I haven't been home since I've been in recovery, so I haven't been learning from my own people. But I do appreciate everything that people have done for me, and that is culture, ceremony, singing, drumming, meditation. These are the connections that I've been missing all my life. These are the ones that, and to make a family that I choose is very sacred to me now because I do choose a better life. I do choose a good life now. I choose to protect my energy. I choose, and that's the only thing I have. My one elder told me that the only thing we have is choice, free will. So we do what we have with it, and that's the only thing we're responsible for. So I'm learning to let things go. Ceremony helps me with that. Ceremony teaches me about balance, about how there is a good and a bad, and I need to acknowledge both sides. I know that I'm a product of change, so it allows me to see people for who they really are, but it also allows me to forgive people for what they've done to me, from, sexual abuse to rape to physical violence, and just honesty as well, because it is very hard for me to accept honesty, even in a good way. It's still hard for me to accept a gift from someone. And this is the gift that I give people now, is I give people my true authentic self. I give people honesty in a kind way. That's what I always pray for Creator. Every day I wake up and I'm thankful for life. I'm thankful for sobriety and recovery and healing. And I'm thankful for the people that see me for who I really am and still care and still choose to love me. As I am thankful for myself and allowing myself for forgiveness, allowing myself to let things go that don't serve me. Because in turn, that is what's giving me my life back. That's what fuels my spirit inside, is that flame that I have that I didn't realize I had. I'm feeling that now. I fuel it with love and kindness and respect and honesty and boundaries, to stop people pleasing, to stop using people, to to be in myself and to be safe there. Right? I like to label things. So in my inner child, I named her Tar Baby because that was my nickname growing up when I was a child. So I embrace my child and I'm parenting her now. I'm parenting her in a safe space that I've created within myself, and that's what's helping me heal. I go to ceremony and I speak to my ancestors. I call my father and my mother into the sweat lodge. are into the Sundance. So when I wanted to come to the program today, I wanted to put my eyebrows on and my lashes, and I was like, I'm just gonna come as myself. I want people to see my sunburn from, being on the land for 10 days and just having to really um, be vulnerable. I see it as vulnerability when I allow people to see me for who I am and to not put on a mask or to put a show on because that's not what I'm about now. I'm about being true to myself and about being true to people and honest. And I'm very honored to be here. Kichimi.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Oh, not Tanya, Nadine. I'm sorry. Um, yeah, that was powerful. I just a lot of things I could relate to there, and thank you for being here. Does anybody that's online have any questions or comments for Nadine? Yeah, Bill? Oh, okay. I'd just like to ask you a couple questions. So, you talked about self-knowledge, in the beginning, doing a lot of things by yourself, and that was the cause of your problems, self-harm, um, and that being kind of a normal state that you grew up in because you never saw anything else. The active addiction and alcoholism was around you from the beginning, so that was normally. But it was interesting that you used the word self-knowledge. Like I wanted to do everything myself, self, self, self. So within the journey of recovery, what's been the most powerful vehicle that has allowed you to see outside of yourself?
Mm, the most powerful vehicle to see outside myself was for me, it was all the things I was carrying. I was carrying the trauma from my mother. I was carrying the abuse from people that have harmed me and thinking I had something to do with it. So if I had something to do with it, if I caused this, then I have to deal with it, right? I. And so in a different way, it was like I looked at it a different way. Like that wasn't me. I didn't cause someone to rape me, right? I didn't cause someone to beat me up, right? So then when I realized that that was their own trauma, then I got lighter. I allowed myself to look at myself. And also like even right now, I sometimes judge people or I'll look at somebody and I'm like, there's something going on with inside me. What is going on? So I've looked inside a mirror, right? I've allowed myself to see myself in the mirror and self-talk. And then realizing also that it's not about me at the same time, right? Like the world is happening and it's going to always go on. The sun will always come up and the sun will go down. And then the end of the day, it's about what I do. It's about how I've treated the people that I come in contact with. It's about me putting out the good energy in the world that I needed, that I lacked as I was growing up. Because if I could help somebody by just giving them a handshake if they're asking for money or buying them a coffee or asking their name, then, I'm doing my part to heal myself because I heal people. I feel like I need to heal people because I wasn't allowed that when I was younger. So yeah, that self is really it's a foreign concept to me because I was selfish. I'm learning how to be selfless, right? So even though it's always about my energy today, my prayers, what I will put out there and how I will walk in a good way, it still is not even about me at the end of the day. It's about Creator because he has the whole plan for me. As a spirit, when I came into this world, he already showed me everything about my life. And I still chose to be here today as a blue thunderbird in this physical world and a spiritual being, right? So I'm learning how to accept that and trusting the process that I am a spiritual being, that my physical life is only here for a short time, and time is also something that I'm also just coming to to terms with, that time is just a concept. It's just digits on a clock. I could step back in time, I could step forward in time and have a dream that puts me in a place that I'm not even aware of yet. Right? I had a dream about my Sundance 2 years ago before I even knew I was going to Sundance. So for me, for me, it's a very like, I'm letting go of self, the self that I know myself in this physical world, and then into my spiritual self, which I'm still learning, very much so. So thank you.
Yeah, you know, another um, phrase that stuck out for me, you talked about growing up, like having to build a false sense of courage, right? Just to sort of get by in the world that you were in, right? And then even like the fact that, you know, as best as you could, like you never wanted to lose your children, like your children were never taken away from you, right? As is often the case, and well, for a lot of people in who live in addiction, right? And you know, um, so within that whole, you know, sort of existence of knowing that well, I think looking back now, you can identify fully that you had a fault, you were constructing false senses of courage, a false identity, right? Along the whole way. Um, and I know for me in recovery, we very much come to understand that addiction is about developing a false identity, right? The first casualty being you lose who you truly were, and in recovery you start to go, like you being a blue thunderbird, going back to your original essence. Um, but something that you said earlier really stuck out for me. You said, even in the darkness before you got to, you know, the day that the lights came on. Um, where that was the moment, when your daughter forgave you and said, "Hey, I want you to be present for the birth of your grandchild." But previous to that, you talked about having glimpses of your true indigenous spiritual self. Now, from where you're sitting today, again, now you just talked about the concept of time and how you know that you can be back, you can move back in it, but you can also move ahead, having dreams about things that are taking place in your life now, seeing yourself dancing to, having a dream about Sundance 2 years ago, and you didn't even know, you weren't conscious of it. So, glimpses of your true indigenous spiritual self. How can you describe what those moments were like, sort of in the context of the darkness that you were in, how they're connected to where you are now?
Yeah, my reflection on that is that even when I was being like uh, a lost person, and I described this when I was having my overdose. I was getting pulled to the ground, and because I overdosed on fentanyl. So I was making my way to the bathroom, and in that bathroom, I stood up and I was like, I'll just have a shower, it'll be okay. But in my mind, I'm like, you fucked up, right? Like, this is not right. I seen the mirror, and it was a full mirror, so the behind me was the shower, but there was nothing there. It was blackness, and I was gray. And I was like, oh my, like, you can't stay here, Nadine. You're not supposed to be here. And then even in that dark moment, I was I knew where I had done wrong, right? And for me, living by my indigenous Anishinaabe ways of laws and natural laws, we have to be honest. We have to be truthful. We have to act with humility. We have to act with love and respect, and courage and bravery. So for me, in those glimpses of my darkness, those lights were shining through because my ancestors, my blood that carries my ancestral blood and that power was coming through and said, no, Nadine, you did wrong, but you have to be honest, right? You have to go and tell people the truth. When somebody asks you a question, you have to be true. So even in those dark times, I could always feel myself within my body. I could feel my spirit there. I just didn't
Mm.
know how to listen to it. I wasn't aware of how to take care of it. So in those moments of like, oh, I'm gonna go drive drunk, but or cheat on my husband, I'm still gonna go tell him the truth, and ask for forgiveness because instead of lying to him, because I could have lied to him and we could have had a beautiful life for years afterwards, right? But that wasn't who I was supposed to be. I was supposed to be honest, even though I was doing bad things and hurting people. So those are those pieces that I had of myself growing up. And even now, like when I meditate, I go back to those times when I could remember being a young lady that had no trauma or had no hardship that I could really remember. And when I go back there, I'm allowed to be back there. Or when I hear a sad story about a residential school survivor, my blood feels those emotions. My ancestors are in there and I could cry for them. I could stand up for them, right? I could protest, I could sing, I could practice ceremony. And that's what I mean about moving back and forth in time. Is that my spirit allows me to do that because of my blood in my bones that are from my ancestors. And that's what I'm just learning to do and very, very grateful for the opportunity to even do that and remember and embrace it.
Okay, so just one more question for you. Um, you talked about also being a product of change. So within, when you're it throughout your whole story and even just talking about the things that you just answered in the previous question, um, you know, we learn in the 12 steps, I mean, within the context of recovery proper, we're doing the step work, and the book talks about fundamentally we suffer from a spiritual malady, right? A spiritual sickness. And, it's the spirit that needs to get healed. So understanding and seeing the power of change in your own life, spiritual change, um, how does this help you see people in a good way, other people, free of judgment?
Um, for me, for the way I feel about recovery and this whole traditional way of healing we've been in with therapy and different ways of doing things, because that's what I'm actually really learning how to do is to weave both worlds into my life, into my spirit, and being able to hear things and to see things and without the mask that people put on, to see a true self with a spirit is the gift that I feel that I'm learning. Maybe that's the gift that I had within myself all this time, but I'm able to see people for their genuine spirit. So even when that happens, sometimes I'll be like, oh, well, why are they doing this? Right? Like I still have those negatives that come into my brain. So for me, change happens within your heart, within your spirit before it gets to your brain and to your mouth. So that's what I'm learning right now as a person. I'm learning to think good thoughts. I'm learning to allow my blood to run with good feelings and love that my ancestors did for me. My mother, my grandmother, they did show me love. And, and just because I was raised in a toxic behavior doesn't mean they didn't love me, right? So accepting those for what they are and just understanding that people have lives, right? People have moments. Someone who does something doesn't define who they are. In that moment they chose to do something for whatever reason, just like I chose to do something in that moment. That doesn't define what my spirit is and how that shines because that will always be there. That true authentic self is always there. Sometimes we just choose not to listen to it. Sometimes we choose to think that we have power over it and we have control. And then just surrendering to understand, like trusting that process of creator that he's in control. It doesn't matter what I do because it's going to happen the way it happens, right? Let it be, let it go, and to embrace things. And that's what I have to do when I look at people. I have to let things go. I have to let my own anger go. I have to let my own judgment go. I can't see them through my eyes of Sasha or this physical being because my physical person is could get angry and jealous and hurt and and curl up or get to these things that I don't want to be. So I'm always looking through my third eye, as I was told, my spirit, and that allows me to see people and to go past what they've done and into their true self and say, like, I could see you. And that's what I tell somebody, I love you. I see you. I'm not going to judge you based on what I heard that you did 2 years ago or whatever, right? And that's where, because that's how I want to be treated. I treat people how I want to be treated. And it's that balance. So I'm very grateful to have that opportunity.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, that I think for me that speaks to sort of uh reciprocating the compassion that you've been shown. Because I know a lot of people that don't really understand the illness. There's a lot of judgment and stigma around addiction, right? And alcoholism and being in recovery, I think receiving so much grace as we do uh, allows us to view others who are suffering with compassion because we don't always know what's going on in somebody's life, right? We don't know their whole story. So yeah, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And look forward to engaging with you further down the road.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Big Witch.
Awesome. All right. So this is a bit strange, but I'm covering today for my friend Bill, who's away, doing work in Kamloops at a big powwow there. And so initially, I was scheduled to speak on this podcast, and you know, so uh, my name's Daniel. I'm an addict, addicted alcoholic, and you know, uh, when Bill asked me to send him a bio about who I am, for this program, I wrote, committed to embracing the present moment, passionate culinary artist with a deep love for the mountains, grounded in the principles of the 12-step program and aligned with my spirituality is a life that's shaped a lot in a spiritual sense by Indigenous teachings and ceremony. So um, yeah, I think really quickly just about, I come from an immigrant family. Was born in a country called Eritrea in Northeast Africa. My mom and dad fled Eritrea, I think when I was about 3 years old to leave, a dangerous place for their young family and with three young boys in tow. And we eventually made our way to Nairobi, Kenya. And I spent 5.5, almost 6 years in Nairobi. And then my family came to Canada. We immigrated to Saskatoon in 1980, you know. Um, and so I think there's always been, from living in recovery and doing the work and sort of understanding where I had lost myself, because in addiction, I always, try to highlight and stress that the first casualty of my life in active addiction for 20 years was that I lost who I was, and so being in recovery, in the last 19 and some plus years, my clean date is March 3rd, 2006. And just like Nadine, I went to treatment once. And before going to treatment, I thought, I need to stop using a specific substance. At that point, it was crack cocaine. And I thought, I need to stop using this substance. I'll go to treatment and I'll be able to continue with my life, as I thought uh, I was going to continue it, And so, thankfully, the 12-step rooms, I was introduced to them while I was in treatment. And, I came to accept early in that point of my early life in sobriety and recovery that I couldn't use anything, that, addiction, recovery was a zero-sum game. And either I was going to live a completely clean life, free of all substance, mind-altering substance, or I wasn't, And so that initial idea and acceptance of that idea kind of eliminated any reservations that I had about successfully or unsuccessfully using anything to change how I feel, you know, and subsequently coming to understand that I lost myself. And so, when I think about what's transpired, when I look at my early life as a child living outside of his own country, outside the place of his ancestry, of his family, of his DNA, his history, his culture. There was an early, I was torn away from the place, the land, and the people who were a part of me, that DNA, that ancestral spirit that determines who I was and what I'm connected to long before anything else transpired, right? And so recovery has been about regaining who I am, finding who I am, who I lost, and so um, it's really interesting when you reflect this. There's a lot to reflect about in life, but as Nadine was sharing, um, I was thinking about my own life and the circumstances in my nuclear family compared to the environment that she grew up in, and for me, I didn't grow up with drugs and alcohol around me. They were actually very forbidden. Yeah, the only person in my nuclear family that drank was my father, and you know, there was issues in my life in the relationship with my father. Fundamentally, he believed in physical discipline and a lot of fear that I carried early in life, and that also contributed to um, the way things turned out in my life was based on the dynamics and the problematic and the trauma of that relationship, Um, but I came to understand all of that in recovery, so um, and that sense of not belonging, even though I didn't know it as a child, especially once we came to Canada, uh, that sense of not really being where you felt fully comfortable. I didn't understand those ideas as a kid. You're trying to fit in. And, one of the things that made me feel different was my language, and I lived in a pretty strict and disciplined home. My parents taught me the way they were taught, but one of the things that was a non-negotiable, whether we were growing up in Kenya or we were growing up in Canada, was that we never were allowed to speak the language of the dominant society around us inside the home. Um, so growing up here, going to school, being outside of the house all day, coming back home, I had to stop speaking English and speak Tigrinya, and it was something that was difficult to adhere to growing up, and I couldn't really understand the importance of it until later in my life. But I'm so thankful that my parents had the foresight to have at least that discipline and to impose a lot of energy in making sure that me and my brothers didn't lose our language because losing your language and being disconnected from your culture um, is a very big part of who you are, and losing that stuff uh, can create distance from who you're supposed to be, So I think some of those seeds of identity and not really fitting in contributed to me sort of like just not being comfortable in my own skin. And so when I found alcohol at the age of 14, you know, um, it was my solution, and I drank alcoholically like an addict from the get-go. Blacked out the first time, and that's how it was for years, and everything else came into the picture. Um, and obviously by the end of it, I had abandoned, uh, my entire kind of like real life, all my friends, all my community, my education, the career path that I had chosen. Um, I was very much disconnected and lived in a lot of shame and guilt, a lot of fear. Um, Mainly because of the ever-present knowledge that I wasn't, I had become somebody who I knew deep down I was never supposed to be or meant to be, you know? uh, that false identity that you create, losing yourself, and then having to construct a completely uh, you know, false set of beliefs and ideas and actions in order to survive and to continuously justify how you're living in active addiction, and so by the end of it, homeless, in a world of legal trouble, disconnected from his whole family, living with a lot of shame and guilt. Um, and I wasn't one of those guys in active addiction that didn't know, that had ignorance as bliss. I was painfully aware that my life had gotten so far off path, but I had lost the choice, my disease owned me. I was completely powerless. And the only way I could try and live with those feelings was just to try and numb them, and eventually that didn't work. And, March 2nd, 2006, I called my family after wanting to make that phone call for years and said, I need help. I want to come home. That's all I could say. And, from that point on, thankfully, I haven't looked back. Relapse is not a part of my story, but outside of treatment, the biggest piece in my recovery has been the 12-step work, right? Primarily in the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous, and also, you know, later on in my life in recovery, AA has also taken up more room, right? And I've done the steps in both fellowships. I can sponsor guys in both fellowships. Uh, but a big part of my journey, that I want to talk about today was how Indigenous teachings and ceremony and my relationships with Indigenous people in recovery have affected and shaped uh, my life. So I was introduced to ceremony in in treatment. The spiritual counselor that was there was a man named John Cuthand, and we he would take us for to his sweat lodge outside of Saskatoon. It was an optional event on Wednesday nights while I was at Calder, and so I went. Every Wednesday night I was there, and then when I got out of treatment, I asked him if I could keep coming, and he said, "Yeah, I was always welcome to come." And so, for the first 3 years outside of that treatment center and living in recovery, I would periodically and make my way to his place for ceremony. And you know, he became an important spiritual teacher and mentor for me. Uh, Especially in the first year and a half, he would interpret a lot of my dreams because in the last few years of being in active addiction, I don't remember dreaming, I remember having nightmares, but I never used to have dreams, or if I did, my subconscious was very much asleep. So it didn't happen very regularly. But in the first year, a lot of really vivid dreams, and John Cothan was there to interpret and make sense a lot of it for me in living in a new spiritual way, and another really important part of sort of my spiritual journey, being connected and having relationships. My first sponsor was Indigenous. Uh, a big part of recovery has been my spiritual connection and finding a relationship with my higher power, most profoundly and directly in nature. As I mentioned earlier, um, you know, I spent a lot of time in the mountains, and that's where I feel most connected, to my creator. Uh, that's where I find it most easily to be my true authentic self. That's where I find an effortless sense of, just being in the present moment. And, you know, that that aspect of my life in recovery was not something that was as pronounced as it is today and has been in the last 10 years, and some of those developments, as Nadine was talking about the fact that like we can move through time, time is not something that passes us. Uh, you know, there has been glimpses of things that I've seen and experienced in my life that were connected to dreams or deja vus before, there's been relationships that I've had. One in particular that comes to mind is with an elder from Saskatchewan named Sam Badger, who uh, who I met a year before I came to Calgary back in 2016 at a sweat on New Year's Day, January 1st of 2016, and you know he I felt his energy before I arrived at ceremony that day, and I spent a lot of that day talking to him, and he taught me about intention, and he told me that when I moved to Alberta, it was very important that I spent a lot of time with the grandfathers and grandmothers, and that it was going to be something that I'd have to devote a lot more time to. And I didn't really understand how profound that message was at that point. But a year later, I moved here, and within a couple of years of being back here, you know, I started going to the mountains a lot, and today it's a big part of my life. And then also when I moved here, and this is like, I think it was 11 years into recovery, right? I didn't have any connections here for ceremony. I didn't have relationships with any Indigenous people that were living in recovery, and that's where I met Bill. I met Bill at an AA meeting called Daily Reflections that is my AA home group now in Calgary, and slowly Bill and I developed a friendship through being in recovery together, and seeing early in his recovery the passion that he had for this spiritual way, and how much he was willing to help others. I watch him sponsor a lot of men and some women, but hundreds, hundreds, hundreds. And it really mystified me because I couldn't believe how much time this guy gave to other people. And eventually, in a really organic sense, our lives became intersected and intertwined in really good ways. And today we have a great friendship. And one of the benefits, to me in a spiritual sense has been that like Bill has become my anchor, my connection to the Indigenous community in Alberta, right? To ceremony, to elders. Uh, I've gotten a reconnection with that part of my life in a really profound way, due to that relationship, and so um, for me, a lot of the journey continues to be to you know to change and evolve, and things transpire in my life that I didn't see, that I could not have seen yesterday or the day before, right? Or 5 years ago, uh and that's the beauty of being a part of this community, right? Is that not only do I get to witness miracles and transformation in my own life, but I also get to be a small part of the solution, right? To not live in fear, shame, and guilt, and to be connected through other individuals that are living in recovery to something that's a lot bigger than me, right? That keeps me connected to my higher power, uh, who's far too big for me to define in any way. Um, I think that's all I have for today. So I'm going to leave it at that. And if anybody has any questions or comments, by all means, we'll open it up for that. And then looking forward to having our third speaker, Christian, join us here. Okay, Christian, ready to go? Okay, just give me a second. We'll get Christian set up.
I I I can't hear anything in here.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, awesome. Hi, Christian. Okay, so uh Christian. So I've had the pleasure of meeting Christian just a little while ago in outside a meeting and you know, had a chance to practice my Spanish with them, So uh I'll quickly introduce Christian and I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. Uh Christian was born in Costa Rica, which is a land that I visited in January for the first time of this past year. And I'm traveling back there in November. So it's really cool that now I have a Costa Rican in my life, in recovery. Uh, Christian moved to Canada when he was 2 years old and has been living in active addiction since the age of 15. Uh, all his problems came after a good blackout binge, and after 27 years of using, he realized he needed help. In his defeated state, he prayed for help and was brought into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Since then, I he has been on this road to recovery and hasn't looked back. And yeah, it's just amazing. Bienvenido, Christian, mi hermano.
Muchas
Eh,
gracias.
Adelante, adelante. Without further ado, Christian.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, like it said, I moved here very, very young. I don't remember back then, but my earliest memories are from my grandmother because she used to take care of me, my brother, my sister, and my cousin. Um, at the young age, my mom, I believe she was usually working, so there isn't very much memory of her when I was young. But at a very young age, I was I was quite the wild child. It really was. I just would make, even from a young age, I'd make some decisions that were not deemed by my grandmother as very wise ones. And I was chastised for it quite a bit. Yeah. Um, from a very young age, I remember being uneasy and uh, an angry child. I really was. Um, for the most part. I'm not sure about for the most part, but I if anything happened, I would react in an angry way. I really was. I I didn't really realize till after I was sober, but I had a lot of trauma. But I guess I had buried that trauma deep, 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 deep inside because I didn't even realize it growing up, right? Um, it was I always seemed to be okay with everything, right? Um, yeah, when we moved to Canada, we moved to Toronto. I lived there. That was in like 1982, and I lived there till 1991. Um, and then we moved to London. And in London, um, I had, yeah, I was quite the wild child. I would run. We lived in this complex, and I would run around there playing with some friends that I met around there, and I get into all sorts of shit. Um, I had my very first. I picked up a smoke at about um, age 12, and me and my friends would hide out in these bushes and just smoke cigarettes, right? I'd be getting in trouble in school all the time, quite a bit actually, especially for fighting. There was a lot of fighting when I was in elementary school and right up into just before high school. Once I got to high school, it just all stopped, right? But yeah, in Ontario, high school starts at grade 9, and I remember my first drink was at 15. I was over at a buddy's place. He asked me if I wanted a beer. I had one beer, and the feeling that came over me was like a feeling of relief, right? Like it almost seemed like I was living in this tension, and as soon as I had that one drink, it was like, oh, like I'm relaxed now. And yeah, that led up into my next drink. Was I remember it was this cinnamon schnapps that my buddy Britt brought out on a Friday night, and we drank some of that. It was a Mickey between three of us. We split it, and the feeling of euphoria that I got was greater. It was like I had a lot more freedom, and it was like I was unstoppable, right? And then probably another weekend, we decided to go out drinking, but this time it was a bigger bottle, and it was vodka, and it was a 2-6 that we got. And that time, that was my first, I was still 15 years old, and that was my first blackout. Like I got drunk out of my mind. And I remember a little bit that I had called my mom, and her boyfriend was living with us at the time, and he drove and he came to pick me up, and I could barely walk. And I got in the vehicle, and I got and I think I don't remember very much of the ride, but they kept on asking me like, what were you drinking? And I kept on lying to them and telling them that I was just drinking orange juice. And I was just sloshed, eh? But yeah, I ended up going, they drove me back home, and I guess I puked everywhere. And yeah, the next day I woke up and I got the silent treatment, and I got I got a good whooping, like a good whooping, like bareback lashing. My mom told me to take my shirt off, and I took my shirt off, and she just laid it like right on my back. Gave me like 6 or 7 slashings, and that was it was weird because I was already older, right? I wasn't like a little kid anymore, and I hadn't gotten a whooping since I was like probably. Oh, I guess I did. My last whooping before that was 14. Yeah, I got them. But yeah, after that we moved to Calgary. I made some friends out here, and yeah, I would drink, but I didn't black out. I didn't black out until I was like after high school. Actually, on graduation, I blacked out big time. Graduation night, I was another night that and it like the want to drink was got more and more because I just felt this like euphoria, like at the time when I was drinking, that like nothing bothered me and I was relaxed. I can do whatever I wanted, right? And it was, yeah, it was just more and more, and I didn't really feel that I was running away from any pain, because I didn't feel like I had any pain or anything that bothered me from life. But I for some reason I just kept on wanting to drink more and more. By the age of 21, I was right into blackout stages. Like I would every time I went out, I drank and I blacked out and blacked out and blacked out. It was like almost every single time. And like every single relationship that I had at in my early 20s was destroyed by alcohol because we would go out, I'd start having fun, everybody would having fun, then I'd black out, and the next morning was a phone call about, yeah, I don't want you in my life anymore, right? And that just kept on like it kept on going over and over till as long as I can, right into my 30s, early 30s, and then after it was just I just stopped dating, right, in my 30s. And it was just the relationships would go as far as just sex, and after that I wouldn't even bother getting into relationships, right? And the drinking just got to being more. I ended up I think I was 36. Oh no, my very first traumatizing drinking was at the age of 21. I was driving. I went to the bar because there was this porn star that was hosting the party, and I ended up drinking way too much. I drove home. I was blacked out, and it was the middle of winter, and I don't even know what happened. All I remember was I woke up the next morning at home, and my parents told me that I had smashed the vehicle onto the curb and it totaled the suspension. And that had to be fixed. And that was my first time trying to quit. But that didn't even last long. I didn't even want to quit. Maybe it lasted a week and a half. Then I was back to drinking. And then the next blackout that I had where it was like, okay, something has to change was when I was 36. And I had just come back from Costa Rica. I went over to my buddy was having a party at his place. We got super wasted. He ended up taking my truck. And this was like a 3-day binge. I got there Friday and we drank all Saturday. And then Sunday, he took my truck and he was completely hammered. Um, he ended up crashing my car, getting into head-on collision with somebody on the oncoming traffic on uh on Glenmore Trail and killing the couple. And the the crazy part about that was that he uh he hit he hit the couple in front, 5 cars in front of where my sister was driving. So my sister saw that whole accident in front of her eyes, and she saw the truck, and she told me that she was like she 100% thought it was me, and her heart dropped. She fucking it, it was very traumatizing for her. And yeah, I didn't when I came back, the guys at the house party told me what happened. Couldn't even believe them. I ended up fucking I was in shock after that. I ended up quitting, and that time I quit, I came into the rooms of AA. I was going to meetings, but I didn't really connect with anybody. I just stuck to myself. And sure enough, 2 months later, I was back on the horse. Like I was drinking like crazy. I ended up moving to Surrey, BC, and yeah, I destroyed my life out there because of drinking. My boss even asked me, he's like, yo, man, if you quit drinking, like, we need you to quit drinking because it's affecting your job. And I quit for like maybe 3 days, and it just got worse. I was drinking like almost every day. I ended up getting fired from that job. I got another job out there. I was just feeling depressed and shitty. I felt like I had nobody there, so I moved back to Calgary, and the drinking just kept on going. And it wasn't until uh 2002 in Christmas time that I I ended up like I was depressed. I ended up locking myself in my apartment, didn't talk to anybody. This is just before Christmas, and I went on a month-long binge, like straight every day, like just more and more and more and more. And I came back to I ended up losing my cell phone somewhere. I got a loaner. I spent Christmas alone drinking, and yeah, when I came back to, it was January 15th, and I got a hold of a friend of mine. I I was like, holy fuck, I didn't even know what happened. It was just one big blackout. Um, and I called him, and he's like, "Oh man, where the hell were you? Like, we were worried. We were doing donuts around the parking lot behind your house, screaming for your name. We couldn't find you." And I just all I said was sorry, which is something that I always said after I came back from a binge. It was like guaranteed. And then I went on another 2 day binge. And after that, I woke up at home and I was fucking still depressed and I was sad and I looked at my life and when I was in my addiction, it was like this dark tunnel I was in. And it just felt like I was completely alone, like completely alone. I had nobody but myself. And and I was looking deep into that tunnel and I couldn't even see a little bit of light. And all I saw was like all the turmoil around me, everybody running away from my life, everything that has gone to shit. I had an eviction notice on my door. Yeah, it was fucked, and I was weeping. I was weeping. And I finally said, I'm like, fuck, I've just ruined my fucking life. There's nobody to turn to. And all I did was pray, man. I I got down after like weeping, I got down on my knees and I prayed and I prayed and I asked God, I was like, God, I know I fucked up everything. All I ever do is fuck shit up. I don't know what I'm doing. Just help me get sober and no word of a lie, like an hour later, a friend of mine gave me a call and he asked me how I was doing and I told him, yo, I'm done with drinking. And he said, okay, I'm coming to pick you up and I'm taking you to a meeting. And he took me to the Garnet Block and it was after that, it was just, once I got there, I got that euphoria of that every day. It was a little bit more euphoria because I was sober. I was still sober and I was going to meetings every day. And it was the euphoria was coming over me and it was great. And then after I got to a point where it was like that euphoria started going down, so I started like really looking for God. I ended up having a friend inviting me out to her church and I got involved with her church, but I was still going to meetings every day and and that was another euphoria. It brought me up. And then after I ended up going to getting baptized. I got baptized and that picked up my spirits, right? It picked up my spirits, but those spirits didn't last. Um, I started feeling like shit, like aggravated with work, aggravated with a bunch of stuff, and I ended up sharing it at a meeting, and Bill was at it actually. And he after the meeting we talked, and he asked me if I have gone through the steps, and I said no. And I and he's like, go through the steps, because those things, they'll all the stuff that you're talking about, it'll just fall off. It'll just it there's something magical about it. And that's when I really buckled down, and I got a sponsor, and I went through the steps, and they everything that Bill told me, like to a T, it happened. Like each step that I took in that process, it just broke something else down, and I really got that that spiritual awakening. And it was amazing, man. It was amazing. It was just everything. And that from that point on, it like my sobriety has been, I mean, the things that have happened in my sobriety have been like a roller coaster, but my peace of mind and my capability of staying calm through everything has maintained like like a charm. Like it's like a fantastic tool that I gained out of it, right? And it was amazing because no matter what I've been through, it had helped me deal with everything. And the more the hardships go that I get through sobriety, the more I dive deeper into this recovery program, and finding I found sponsees. At first, it was right off the bat, I found two sponsees, and I took them through the book. And they, every time we meet up, like it has helped me release more uneasiness in my life. It's been so fantastic, because like eh, the moment before I have to meet up with them, I usually have this feeling of like, oh, I gotta go there, and like I'd rather be sleeping, or I'd rather be doing this. But then after once, like I'd force myself to go meet with them, and once we met, we'd have these conversations. They'd ask questions, and questions I didn't even think of, and then it would just reveal more information about the program. And doing that has been such a lifesaver, because I've been through a lot, especially in this last year. Like I've been through, like I'm going through a career change, and that was very scary, because I've been I've been at this career for about 20 20 plus years, and going into something else is scary. I'm not used to change a lot, right? I it's just yeah, it's been a magical 2.5 years, man. I'm forever grateful for this program, and forever grateful for everybody who was in this program, and it's just been amazing. It really has, man. That's about all I have to share about my story.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you
No
so much for
problem.
your words, man. Uh, yeah. Just, you know, I'm gonna ask you a few questions here. Does anybody else have any questions before I direct some at Christian? Okay. Um, few things that stood out for me. You talked about the euphoria that you found in the drink, initially, and the freedom that it gave you. You felt a sense of freedom, you know. Um, and then later on, when you started finding euphoria in going to meetings. and living in recovery. Um, it's kind of interesting that, that same that you use that same terminology, but you were found, you found it at two very different places and for very different reasons. Um, just wondering what was like. I can understand the euphoria of that first drink for sure, because I chased that feeling, like all of us do. We try to recreate that over and over, right? Um, but what gave you the euphoria in being in recovery after that surrender? What was it about the
Uh,
meetings?
it was the kind-heartedness from the people there, the welcoming, the 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 s- the stories that they would share at the meetings of everything they've gone through, and how the program would help. Like it was a lot of camaraderie, right? Like every time I'd walk into a meeting, there's always somebody saying hello to me. There was always somebody um, asking how my day was, and being able to get up, and they would ask me to share, right? And being able to open up in those places was uh was amazing. It really was. And I think there was a lot of hope in those rooms. There was a lot of hope because a lot of people shared about how their their life was shit before, and then after, because they came to AA, that they started gaining everything back, right? They started gaining everything back, and I was seeing the changes in the way my family was reacting to me, right? Um, at first, the only person that was really talking to me in my immediate family was my brother, right? And he believed in me, right? And once I got out of that dark hole of, all I saw was like, because all I felt that was that I was all by myself and there was nobody to help me, to come into the rooms and see that there's people that are willing to give help to somebody who didn't think they had help, right? It really gives you yeah, that sense of euphoria, like that sense of, like, there is God, right? Especially after those prayers, like those prayers, the prayers that I had committed myself, that I told God, before I got into these rooms, I'll do whatever you want. I'll just please help me. I'm like, I can't do. And I came into the rooms, and the crazy part about it is when I read the 12 steps, I read step 3, which at the time I thought was to give your will up to God. But it, I read that and I was like, wow, like I had just done that. And I looked at just that recent little bit on how I I gave up my will at that moment, and then my friend called me right after and brought me to the rooms, and he was bringing me to the rooms every day, right? He was bringing me to the rooms because he had just relapsed like 3 days before, and it yeah, it just brought that euphoria in me. There was so many aspects of it that I can't even think about right now, but a lot of it was the closeness of everybody in those rooms, and the more often that I came, the more I got these friendships, right, from the rooms. It was it was amazing, man.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. And I mean, it was also interesting that before, you know, you talked about the experience of like sitting there by yourself drinking for a month at Christmas time, it made me think of the last two Christmases, of my life in active addiction. Because up until, those last two Christmases, no matter what was happening in my life, how miserable things were, I always went home at Christmas to be with my family. But in the last 2 years,
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And in fact, the last Christmas before I got clean, which was the Christmas of 2005, I had called my parents and said, I'm going to come for Christmas. And they made arrangements. A cousin of mine that lives in Calgary here at the time came and picked me up. I stayed at his place for 24 hours. He bought me a bus ticket to take me to go back to Saskatoon. And I got on the bus I, to, it was a midnight bus that went to Saskatoon that would arrive at 7 or 8 in the morning. And my dad was going to pick me up. And I got on that bus, and just as it was pulling out of the old Greyhound terminal on 9th Ave and 14th Street there, I asked the driver just to pull over and let me out, because again, I could not get past the shame, right?
Yeah.
Like my spirit wanted me to go home, but I just could not do it. I had so much shame, and you know, and that's probably one of the most painful things I'd ever done to my father. He gets up in the morning and is waiting for me to get off this bus, and I'm not there. And after getting off that bus, I have never used that hard. Like I was using to die, so I can totally relate to that. And so coming out of that darkness, and it was interesting that you used, you described it as being in a dark tunnel and not even being able to see any light. Uh, and obviously, saying, God, help me. And there it is, and your prayer gets answered, and a friend calls you and gets you to an AA meeting, very powerful. Um, so we often hear in recovery about the pink cloud, in early recovery, after
Uh,
surrender, I don't know, I was thinking about that when you were talking, that pink cloud. And for me in my life, uh, and my whole family was that was experiencing that pink cloud when I came home. Everybody was happy that I was finally home. Uh, but I think for me, I relate that to that grace of God, right? Like, after years of being lost and fighting and wanting to do things my own way, finally, when you achieve true surrender and give up and ask for help, I think that mercy and that grace, that's, that euphoria that you talked about. It just made me think of the pink cloud that we experience in early recovery. Was that sort of what you were talking about?
oh yeah, big time. That pink cloud was definitely in my life.
Hmm.
And I and I was and early of my recovery, I was chasing that pink cloud. I was really chasing it. And every time I went, I like I went to church, I got baptized, I was still chasing that pink cloud.
Mm,
But it wasn't until I started going through the steps that I started doing the real work.
hmm.
And that's when everything started coming, and I could feel that it was a more it was something with more substance, It
More
was some
profound.
more profound, yeah. And my connection with God started becoming deeper, deeper and deeper and deeper to that this point I'm I don't even my understanding of God isn't the same understanding when I first got into recovery, because like nowadays I'm like I go to sweats. I do I like just a couple days ago, a friend of mine, we smoked pipe and we prayed, and everything has become uh more natural, more getting into touch with nature,
Mm,
getting into touch with, because it seems to me that nowadays my higher power is very much alive, very much in nature, in my surroundings, in everything around me. And it's all those things have helped me uh, in my sobriety a lot, quite a bit, because it it's just it's made a connection within my heart, right? And it's been an amazing 2.5 years, man. It really has.
Yeah, just a couple more things. Another thing that
Yeah.
I was thinking about when you talked about, that second really traumatic thing at the age of 34, at 36 you were, and your friend borrowed your truck and ended up killing a couple, and your sister was 5 cars away and witnessed the whole thing. I couldn't help but think and understand that, like, that could have that should that was, you know, that could have
Yeah,
been you, right? Like that was you in that truck,
yeah, that was
and that there's no coincidence that for some reason there was something divine at play, that you weren't it behind the wheel at that moment.
exactly. That was it was no, it could have been me. And there was so many other divine interventions that like that like if he would have left them like a split second earlier, right? He could have collided with my head-on collision with my sister. It could have if it could have been me driving that vehicle. It could have been like oh man.
So
I
how how do the steps help you come to term with that, for example? Because I'm sure there's been times where you felt guilt about that whole
shame.
incident, right?
Oh, the steps they for me to come to terms with that, and there's so many more incidents that have come close, but that one's one of the biggest ones for me to come terms with that. It it was I my second chance that I have
Mm,
right that I've had, right?
mm,
Being able to to help others and not just to help my family, right?
mm.
To help in my sobriety, to be able to be there for them in in any way that they can. There was a lot of shame in that. There's been a lot of shame with a lot of things like uh in my life, because from that accident there was more other things that had pres
Trans
prescribed or transcribed from that. Like it
Yeah,
it developed into other things that I'm still dealing with. I'm still trying to I'm paying off that truck, right?
yeah.
And to come to terms with that was just to see God in my life was a way of me seeing uh, that wasn't that he cared about me, right? That I don't even really know. That's
Okay. Um, okay. Um, yeah, I guess, we talk about living amends in recovery, right? You
yeah.
know, so with your sister, for example, who was traumatized in that situation, how does a program give you the opportunity to make living amends to her?
Um, well, for the program allows me to first of all, by showing my sobriety, give give back the trust that I had lost with her, right? I had lost
Mm,
a lot of trust. I mean, she didn't talk to me for a year, And like I would go over to her place because my brother is living with her, and I'd go visit my brother, and she wouldn't talk to me for the longest time, right? And and then and nowadays, I mean, I'm talking to her again. We've connected once again, right? And the program uh, gives her the opportunity to release any of those traumas, right?
Mm,
It gives her the chance to to be able to talk about it, right?
mm,
To talk about it, and anything that she would like me to do to fix any of that, then
hmm.
it gives them opportunity to do that, and it has given all my family the opportunity to bring back that trauma, bring it back, live through it again, and then come to a conclusion about that trauma, right? By talking about it, by asking me to do my part into making it better, right? Making a resolution in their life, right? Because it's not really about making a resolution in my life. I'm, but helping them helps me resolute that, right?
Yep,
Doing
yep,
everything, devoting any of my free time to anything that they need helps it resolute any of the shame that, but it really doesn't, that isn't the purpose behind it. Like the purpose is a selfless purpose, right? To be able to live in allow me to live in a selfless state, right? To
yep, yep.
give to give instead of taken, because all my life, while I was in uh in addiction, all I did was take, right?
Yep.
And this opportunity to give back is what it's all about. Because from now on in my life, I need to start devoting my life towards giving back to not only my family, but giving back to humanity, giving back to the earth, giving back to society, right? To
To be of
help
service.
those,
To
yeah,
be of
to be
service.
complete of service, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the only thing that maintains our sanity, right?
Yep,
Because our
yep,
minds are so easy to go back into that selfish thinking of poor me, and all that selfish way of thinking that we learn to be through our traumas, right? We
yep,
learn
yep,
to be selfish through our traumas because we were constantly in fear of going through those traumas again. But yet those fears drove us into more trauma, that we were just driving ourselves, and it just made more and more and more. And now we have to step out of that cycle, right?
yep,
Step out of
yep,
that cycle and come into a new cycle where God God dictates where he wants us to be. It's no longer our own selfish ways, right?
yep,
It's
yep.
all about signs,
Yeah.
whether God wants us here or there, right?
Yeah, so yeah, that makes me think, of the ripple effect, right? We know we we all know that like addiction, alcoholism is a family disease. And when I can
Mhm.
be the single guy that's in the addiction in my family, the only guy, but everybody's touched by the disease,
Oh yeah,
and you know, understanding also that like the ripple effect of one alcoholic or addict healing and finding recovery is so powerful because it allows the whole family, the opportunity, not always, but the opportunity to heal, right? And that,
exactly,
further down the road, you come to understand that the amend process is about facilitating the healings of those that you've hurt, right? Where initially it's just about like getting out of the pain and the misery that you created in your own life, So, um,
exactly.
okay, okay. I think I had one other thing that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, you talked about, like meeting Bill and then, him sharing the message that, the work was, the pink cloud was wearing off basically, uh, and you weren't getting what you were getting from the meetings anymore. And, you know, really coming to understand that and following the suggestion that the steps are what you needed to do, and you needed guidance with a sponsor to do that. And I really like the way you stated it. Your words exactly where it gave me peace of mind and the capability to stay calm no matter what was happening, regardless of the new hardships in my life. Um, and then you talked about working with sponsees and that every time you met with them, uh, it releases the unease that I was going through in the moment. Um, yeah, so, you know, and now just to wrap it up, you talked about, just in your previous answer, you said now life is about being of service, giving back to nature, giving back to your family, giving back to your community. Um, And so it's very, for me, I really appreciate somebody who's talking about sponsorship, and that even no matter how long you've been here, how much recovery you have, we still self will always be there to a degree, right? We need to continuously uh, challenge that default setting, which is
Mhm.
what is natural to an addict, right? And so
Yeah.
uh, I think, yeah, it really crystallized that idea for me that like, because I experienced it in my own life that when working with another sponsee through the steps or whatever the case may be, it always takes me out of myself, you know? Yeah, if you could just sort of like talk about what the spiritual mechanics of that are in that 12 step in working with others, that sort of how does it work for you that it takes you out of the unease or stress or hardships that you're dealing with in your life at any particular moment?
Well, because it's switched my mind into from thinking about what's going on in my life at the moment, and to it forced me to start thinking, okay, how can I help him? How can I help? What part of this book that we're reading through can will help him get through his addictions, right? We'll get some. I tried to give him all the information that I knew about the readings that we were going through, to be able so that he can have a sense of relief while we were going through it, right? And a lot of the times a lot of the times it wasn't even that part. I'd get into that mode to try to get as much information out of the book to give to the information to elaborate on it for him, to help him understand this information. And then he would, a lot of times, my sponsee would have questions, right?
Mm.
And some of those questions, and actually every single time my sponsee would have a question, the question would relate to my life.
Ah, yes, yes.
The question would not only relate, he had that question, but that question would relate to my life too.
It's
And
always
then,
a it's always a mirror to what's happening in my life in that moment.
yes, every single time and it was like every time he'd ask me a question, I'd sit and I'd think, and I'm like, wow, that really relates to my life right now. And then after I and a lot of times the hardships would make me deal with them, like either pray or um come to the conclusion that it's out of my power, right? Give it all up to God, have faith in him and pray a lot, right? And so when I was explaining to him, I would explain it in a way that was going on in my life at the same time, right? And and then after I would take that information of that I gave him, and I would apply it even deeper into my own life, right? And then like some of the questions, like I wish I could I wrote all these questions down because like they would have been they would have been amazing. I know that for a fact, but for me, as soon as I say something or it just slips out of my mind, right? It's like a lot of times those experiences that you have, they're very existential.
Yes.
So in the grasp of that moment, everything is happening. And then once it goes away, it's just like you're just left with that experience, right? And
Yeah.
that's the thing with going through the book with a sponsee is it's all uh, it's all an experience. And
Experiential. Yeah.
yeah, everything is just experiential and it's in that moment. And that moment like brings you into a new way of seeing life, like
Yeah. No, I
of
appreciate that.
how to put yourself aside, right?
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up right there, bro. So thank you
Awesome.
so much, man.
Awesome. It
Uh
was a pleasure. I thank you guys for allowing me to share. This was the most amazing experience that I've had so far. It is.
Amazing. Yeah, all our stories are powerful and important, So I thank you for being of service and sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And I'm sure it will help somebody out there, if not today, tomorrow. So
Hope so.
thank you, Christian. Again, thank you to Nadine Descharme also for being here. Thank you, Tanya Llewellyn, for behind the scenes. She's making sure all of this happens, technically because I'm virtually illiterate when it comes to the electronic world. So um, there's a lot of work that goes into this, and a lot of people behind it. And I want to thank Bill for uh, creating this platform. That's an important part of the solution, especially uh, for Indigenous members of our community, of our city, of the different nations around us, and of this country. It's uh, it's really important work, and it's it's really good to be a part of the solution. So um, we'll just finish up here. Thanks to the FCN for being a collaborator and co-host on this platform. So in finishing, adhering to the philosophy of one person, one family, one community at a time. What look to talk, Billwardlife is about customized workshops, speaking engagements, guidance, and resources specifically to and for the First Nations community. The goal is to educate, inspire, and guide our people to become the best individuals, families, and communities they can, utilizing proven methods, strategies, and interactive techniques to improve the overall health of communities. Working with uh, communities on an individual basis to help identify the issues that require attention, focusing on the strengths of each community, and providing guidance to maximize the benefits of these strengths. Um, our world is constantly changing. We as First Nations people need to keep our culture strong and never forget what makes us so special. We need to ask ourselves the question, what made us relevant in the past and what makes us relevant today? And that's our culture, our people. So, uh, we promote change by teaching our young people that they are our future. We try to give them the tools they need to best represent themselves and their communities and to maintain our culture and our beliefs. So we're going to leave it at that. Thank you to everybody who tuned in, and hope to see you guys again. Follow Billboard Life, the UDR cast, all the stuff's available online. Um, Feel free to send messages, emails, Instagram, Facebook, all of it, So we'll leave it at that. And Thank you for everybody that was here today. Over and out.